Willkommen beim Filmmakers Talk mit Emma Thompson, genau genommen Dame Emma Thompson. Leider sind wir etwas verspätet. Emma Thompson, das wissen Sie alles, seit den 90er Jahren eine ganz feste Größe im englischsprachigen Kino. Sie war vorher schon auf der Bühne zu sehen. Sie ist hier, wo sie den CineMerit Award bekommt, mit 4 Filmen vertreten, die alle auf irgendeine Art Meilensteine für sie gewesen sind. Howard's End, Nanny McPhee, weil sie da komisch ist. Sie kann einen zum Lachen und zum Weinen bringen. Und da bringt sie einen halt zum Lachen und beweist auch einigen Mut. Und Sense and Sensibility und ihren neuen Film Kindeswohl. Und Sense and Sensibility ist überhaupt ein Meilenstein, weil sie da einen ihrer beiden Oscars für bekommen hat, und zwar als Drehbuchautorin, weil sie auch die einzige, also nicht nur Schauspielerin, sondern überhaupt ist, die sowohl einen Oscar bekommen hat als beste Drehbuchautorin, als auch als beste Schauspielerin. Also heiße ich hier im Namen des Filmfests Sie willkommen und Emma Thompson.
I'm not sure, maybe you go there. No, it's okay. Thanks so much, thank you. Dankeschön, Dankeschön, Dankeschön. Vielen Dank, danke, danke, danke. Danke, Munich, danke, Munich. Okay, now I have to stop now. I was going to put to the tune of the star in The Star Is Born, you know, the man that got away. I was going to sing an entire thing, and then I didn't have time to write the words because I only got to Danke, Munich. So let's start.
You could have written new words for it, though. How did you have the nerve as a young actress, the guts to write your own screenplay?
Oh, that's a long story. It's a long story, and it is partly of my nerve, but it's also because I was very lucky. So it's to do with certain privileges that I had, and also certain people who were men in the power systems who championed me. So, you know, that has to be acknowledged, that when I was a student, and I sort of first discovered feminist literary criticism and discovered that I was, you know, very firmly feminist, and started to write sketches because I was a comedian for a long time, and fought my way through the thickets of the fact that nobody thought that women were funny or could be funny. I mean, really, it's quite a long time ago now. His lifetime, you know, 40 years ago I was starting all of this. So it was hard, all of that, and I did have to be quite brave. I mean, okay, this is funny. When I was about, 19, we went with the Footlights, with Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry, and we were all together doing a silly thing. We went and did a sketch show, a comedy show, at the Philips Small Appliances campaign dinner at the Birmingham Exhibition Centre in the north of England. Glamorous it wasn't. So we're there and we're doing the show, and I realised that on the stage there's all these businessmen, all men, and they're all completely drunk, and a lot of them have got their heads in their soup. And on the stage, there's a lady who's topless, and she's got a rasoir, you know, and she's demonstrating the Philips Lady Shave, which was the thing that you use to shave your legs, and she's got nothing on top. And I'm in the wings wearing a long black raincoat down to my things, and a huge Scottish tam o' shanter, because I'm about to come on and sing a comic song. I've worked for 14 years at the Castle of Glenmark. To a group of businessmen who've just watched a naked lady shaving her legs. That's my past. So, yes, I had to be brave. That took a lot of courage, but I haven't thought of that story for a long time. So, we got snowed in it snowed and we couldn't leave Birmingham. So we were stuck with all the businessmen and the stripper in the Birmingham. And I thought, I've got to do something. I decided to write a monologue, a sketch comedy monologue. It was the first one that I wrote. And the first thing that happened was I was doing a radio show with a comedian called Richard Stilgo, an older man. And he read the monologue and he said, do it on my radio show. And I didn't have the courage. So I didn't. And then I regretted not having the courage. I was only 19. And so then when we moved on into making more television, I fought to have the space to write a monologue in the second series. And I remember it so well because I would write the monologues and I would rehearse them. And as I started to rehearse, all the boys would just walk out of the room. And, it didn't occur to them to stay and show interest. It just didn't occur to them. I don't blame them. This is the world. So first of all that, and then I wrote a show for the Edinburgh Festival, which was all sketches. And I was really helped by a man who wrote, actually also really championed comedy by men and women of colour at that time, which was also very ignored. So, these people who gave me chances and opportunities must also be remembered, because without them I would never have written a screenplay, because I wrote sketches until I was 26 for a living, and I wrote a television series, 6 half hours. Everyone said, oh, it's man-hating, it's all there was. I mean, it wasn't. There was just sketches about what I was thinking about the world. So there was a sketch about the female orgasm. There was a sketch about droit du seigneur. There was all sorts of interesting things that I thought were interesting. There was a sketch about the diet industry.
I have to say, were very, very unusual at the time.
They were very unusual at the time. They were not thought of at the time. And so people like Caitlin Moran, who's a young, very famous comedian in my country, said, when I saw that you had written about the female orgasm in the BBC, I thought, oh my God, why? Who allowed her to do that? How did that happen? And so I created a space in that sense, a small space, but it was a space in which other young women suddenly thought, oh, I feel comfortable in that space. And when I was talking to the film students yesterday, I was saying, what you have to do if you don't see or hear what you want is make the space. And you just don't know how you're going to do that. And one of the first sketches I wrote was 2 Salvation Army women talking about penises. And I performed that with my mother.
But honestly, wasn't nobody at the BBC trying to stop you?
Clearly not. I mean, they may have been being held them back, but afterwards, when the show came out, I mean, there were people who wrote in the newspapers, all men, I'm afraid, saying, she should never have been given the money to do this. So, I was smacked down. But this is what's so great about failure and disappointment, is that even though I was really crushed by that response to my work, really crushed by it, and I stopped being a comedian. I said, okay, I'll act then. They like it when I act, I'll act. I written a sketch. God, it's about a penis again. I'm so sorry. I'm beginning to sound slightly Freudian, but actually it was inspired by a short story by Edith Wharton, and it's about sexual education, because the story is about a young woman who comes back to her parents and says to her parents, you knew who you were sending me off to. A brutal man who would misuse you. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me? So I took that serious story and I turned it into a sketch about a Victorian woman coming back to her mother and saying to her mother that she's slightly concerned about her husband, who has been pointing at a small creature that's clearly attached to his body, that she thinks part of his scientific work, and she doesn't, because of course she's got no idea. Nobody told her what men look like with no clothes on, or that this thing shifted and changed shape. What the fuck? Of course that's going to be completely weird. And if you don't know about it, and you've never seen anyone naked, hello Ruskin, you go, well, of course it's going to be strange and disturbing. And it was because of that sketch about a woman who had not been told what this was, which was a comedy version of the Edith Wharton story, that Lindsay Duran asked me to write the screenplay of Sense and Sensibility.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that great? The connection, and Edith Wharton, I think, would have been very pleased.
I haven't read a lot of Edith Wharton, but I wouldn't have thought that
she's
she was...
great. You should read her. She's brilliant. This is really hard to do with a microphone. Okay, I'm just saying. Okay, go on.
So, why did you have the nerve? Because most young actresses would have just fit in much earlier. And you somehow seem to have decided you will do your own thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I was lucky because I was also able to say to all the older men who tried to, get their hands into my shirts, I would grab the wrist and say, that's inappropriate. So I don't know where that came from, that strength.
Haven't you been raised to fit in?
I think I've been raised by actors who were penniless. Do you want to answer that? It's probably my agent. Oh, no, actually, it's not. He's here. I don't know what gave me that. I have no idea. But the person who helped me with the screen, when you're writing a screenplay, you have to have a good editor. Mm-hmm. Or when you're writing a novel, or when you're writing poetry, great editors actually shape books. I mean, Orwell and T.S. Eliot, great poetry writers, Brontes, would say, it was the people who read their stuff and then gave them feedback. We mustn't forget that creativity is not about one person suddenly being a genius. It's a very sort of old-fashioned way of thinking about it. It's always lots of people. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky because I had a great editor in the person of Lindsay Duran, who asked me to write the screenplay, and when I presented her with a 300-page screenplay, which is basically 6 films, she said, it's a little long. We can work on that. And then help me to develop it. But the person I asked when I first was given the job was Ruth Provajavala, who'd done the screenplay for Howard's End and for Remains of the Day. And I said, how do you adapt a classic novel? And she said, dramatise everything and then see what works. So I sometimes say that to young writers when they say, well, what am I going to write? I said, well, think of a story, dramatise the whole thing from beginning to end and then see what works, because you'll be surprised. Some of the things that are not... as it were, very dramatic in your mind, or perhaps in the book that you're adapting or whatever it is, will be very dramatic. And then some of the things you think are going to be hugely dramatic turn out not to be. Mm-hmm. There's a scene in Sense and Sensibility in the book where Willoughby turns up in the middle of the night to say, where is she when Marianne's very ill? Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh my God, just to write that scene is worth the price of the screenplay alone. I wrote it and I wrote it and I wrote it and I wrote it, and it never worked and it never made it into the film. Mm-hmm. So you just don't know.
Was it hard than letting somebody else direct it, be there all the time but not take all the final decisions? Or was that...
No. Again, I think I've just felt so privileged that this bunch of pages was being lifted, and it's like watching it's an extraordinary experience to start only with a piece of paper and a pencil and then end up on a set where hundreds of people have created around you. Actors have learnt your words, costume designers have found little bits of lace that just express the sensibility of that woman or that man, that you're surrounded by other people's art, and that their art is coming in mm-hmm. and meeting with yours, and you're making this beautiful tapestry, this beautiful thing. It's a lot of people, and I think that's one of the most exciting things about it.
Yeah. Would you... Well, as an
actress, I can expand on
when you are in a film where you had nothing to do with the script at all, do you ever feel tempted to add a little help?
No, I feel tempted to relax. I feel tempted to walk off the set when I finished a scene, have a cup of tea, and flirt with one of the electricians. That's what I feel tempted to do. Believe me, it's so fantastic not being responsible for the script. And I'm really lucky because I try to choose things that have been well written, you know. I mean, look, sometimes I work for money. Because I'm a woman and I have to earn, and I've always earned my own living. So for young women, when they say, you know, how do you create your life? I say, well, I've earned my own living. It's very important to have your own money. You must always have your own money. You must never be dependent on a man. If you want your liberty, that's number one. Because you can't survive without money. And you certainly can't be an artist without money, as Virginia Woolf said so brilliantly in A Room of One's Own. So that's number one. So sometimes I have to earn money because I'm a woman with quite a lot of dependence and all of that. And so, for instance, I will occasionally take a job like playing the boss of the Men in Black facility where there actually wasn't a script at all. But that was good fun. And, you know, I got to wear a cool suit and, you know, look at Will Smith in the flesh. So I was fine with that. So you know, let's not, we have to remember that you have to cut your cloth. You're not always in a very serious artistic situation, and sometimes you're having a lot of fun and being paid, which is great. I like that. I like that too, and I don't want to underplay that.
No, I was just trying to find out whether you enjoy being powerful on set or whether you just like to blend in.
Well, let's talk about that phrase, being powerful. Let's unpack that a bit, because I think
what
it's
what it means.
What it means, yeah, what it means. Because for me, being powerful means something very internal and something very personal. So I think of powerful people, not as people who have external status or power, but as people who have a kind of wisdom and enough complexity to allow them to be genuinely decent. That there's power for me it's so associated with achievement and status. And that to me is a very, very patriarchal form of power. And I don't like it. So I really don't like it. So I would say that when people say that I'm powerful, I would think that I have a personal power in the sense that I have had lots of experience. I like human beings. I'm interested in the world. I have curiosity. And I have energy, and all of those things, yes, combine after quite a long life now. And I say that because my father was dead at 52 and I'm 59 now. That's, I think, for me, is the definition of power. It's a kind of way of being in the world that allows everyone else space, but yet influences. It's something that accepts all of the things and can make decisions based on experience, wisdom, which I think I have a little bit of now, even though I still make really stupid mistakes. But, you know, I'm a human being. Being able to say, I have my weaknesses, I have my vulnerabilities, but I think I know some things now. I know some things because I've experienced them many, many, many times. So that's a great feeling, and that I think is real power. Yeah. So when you say, thank you.
So we've seen the Me Too Time's Up movement in the past few months, which is a reaction to the abuse of that patriarchal power you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So with the wisdom you have, having been in that business for so many years, what do you think the steps forward would have to be? How can the film industry change for the better?
Well, loads of things here. And Frances McDormand was right. You know, the inclusion rider is a great thing to remember because, you know, we talk about quotas, and I have lots of arguments with people talking about, well, you can't have quotas for people of colour or women, you know, because then people are offended by it. And Lionel Shriver was just talking about it. And I just, you know what, a really good answer to that is, you know what the quotas have been up to now? Well, they've been 100% male. That's the quota. That's been the quota in every walk of life for centuries. So when you change the quotas, you're just changing another quota, which was 100% male. So let's just, you know, not worry about the fucking quota system anymore and just say, you know, we've got to make space. Now, Me Too and Time's Up have been so interesting to me because again, it's about space. Or when we change, when human beings change, we change when there's space for us to explore one another. And we do that face to face. We do that by talking. We don't generally do it by making law, although laws can be very helpful and sometimes they're very necessary. For instance, in countries where, you know, they want to kill homosexuals. You need a law against that. That's not a good thing. So sometimes law is very important. But when we're talking about deep, deep change in the binary ways in which we have all had to be, male, female, and actually to a certain extent black, white, we have to talk. And the Me Too Time's Up movement has been so good about inclusivity as well, so that we've all started to go, oh, and I have too. You know, I mean, yes, I'm a militant feminist. I have been for a very, very long time, but I've learnt so much from these young women who are saying, oh, but I've had this experience and this is what's happened to me and this is what's been taken for granted. And I've gone, oh, God, that's awful. I mean, I just learnt, and you tell me if this is, that the question, female masturbation is a taboo. I didn't know that. I've been masturbating furiously since I was 7 years old. I don't understand that. I don't understand it. But young women of my acquaintance just told me that, and I'm going, well, that's interesting. Who knew? Well, let's talk about that. What's really interesting to me is that I'm hearing different questions. And when I go to the universities and I go to Edinburgh Festival and I watch pieces of writing by young women, I'm hearing different voices and I'm hearing different ways of describing growing up, and I'm hearing young men describing things differently, and I'm also seeing what young men struggle with this unbalanced world where suddenly the iconography is changing and suddenly women aren't so interested, actually, because I am just bored with a lot of masculine storytelling. I really am bored, and so I'm really interested in what women have to say and what young women have to say at the moment. And at the same time, I'm really interested in what women of colour have to say, gay women have to say, because of course lesbians are so much left out of it. And by the way, do not miss the show Nanette on Netflix by Hannah Gadsby, which was one of the greatest pieces of Promethean art to have visited our world since the Renaissance. Seriously, she's just great. And the way in which she created a space for us to look at our torment, you know. So what I think is about patriarchy is I think it's a traumatic power system that is as bad for men as it is for women in many ways, because most men I know would rather chew their own arm off than force themselves on anyone. But you know, clearly we had a system in which that was made perfectly possible, that women simply did not have jurisdiction over their own bodies. They had no boundaries. And there are many places in which that's still the case. So look, when you ask me this question, we have to recognise that it's happening in many different places at completely different speeds. In some places, the arguments about gender and sexuality and who we are proceeding at the speed of light. You know, the gender balance discussion where the fluidity of our sexuality is being discussed. This is fascinating, and it's leapfrogging over a great number of our old ideas about what it is to be male, female, whatever it is. You know, now we've got lots to choose from. I'm cisgender. Yeah, I know that word. It's a very modern word. I had to learn it, and it's confusing to me. But I'm so happy to be confused. and living within the complexity of the human condition and not being told I've got to be that. I'm so relieved that this space has opened up. It makes me feel alive and energized and inspired. But in many other places, the opposite is happening. So we have to remember that too. But let's not talk about it this afternoon because it's depressing.
Well, what I find not depressing... What I do not find depressing at all, but very, very... gives me very much hope, is that I've had many discussions about Me Too, but you're the first one who responds solely talking about women. You didn't talk about men at all.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because so much of the time, we ended up talking about lots of old white men who'd done horrible things, and I just thought, well, that's not the problem. Obviously, it's the problem. It is part of the problem, but the problem is the system
taking the space.
Yeah, the problem was the system that allowed that to happen. Of course, you're going to have bad behaviour in a system which puts one group of people very much under the heel of another. That's what's going to happen. So that's why when I did my first interview about the Harvey Weinstein case, and that's the last time I'm even going to say those words, I was talking to this woman on Newsnight, actually, in London. I said, but I was really confused. I said, this is the world we live in. This happens everywhere. This kind of abuse is everywhere. Didn't you know that? And it was the next day that everyone's going, oh my God, yes, it is. And then I thought, well, okay, so really what we need to do is talk. We need to really talk. We need to have conversations about these systems and how we undo them. And we need to do that as a matter of urgency. Yeah. We really do.
Well, we do have a limited space of time, so if anybody has a question for Emma Thompson, because I've been told to take questions from the audience if there are any.
Would you like a mic, darling? Do you want a mic? Here, you have a mic. And then I'll take you back.
Okay. So my question is, I've also been thinking about the book by Virginia Woolf, in which she writes that it is so important that women earn their own money in order to become independent, and also Simone de Beauvoir in Le Deuxième Sexe, and all sorts of, these feminists write that. But how dangerous is it when when women get to work, and even while working, they can't be independent because of this system? Where's the way out?
Well, what you're describing, I think, is really important. And it really has only just occurred to me how much energy I used up as a young woman trying to protect myself. When I was on the tube or when I was alone at night, how much anxiety I had about being alone in the streets or being alone on a train, and how often I was, in danger. And we use a lot of energy up doing that. It would be nice to have that energy for ourselves, to have that energy to do the things that we want to do with, just to develop ourselves. We use a lot of energy protecting ourselves in our workplaces, particularly, and actually, women who work in service industries, in the hotels, as waitresses, are highly, highly at risk because they're in jobs that are regarded as less than jobs, and they're automatically thought of as, and I heard one woman who worked in a hotel saying, I sometimes think that the customers who come to this hotel think that I come with the price of the room. And this is not something that we would necessarily recognise because, but I mean, it's there, it's absolutely out there. So you're right, you're telling me, and I'm looking at you, and I'm sensing, that inside you there is that anxiety about workspaces and how you can feel because men would take up so much space and without thinking about it, which would be nice if we could all do that. Do you know what I mean? There's how we do it though is by entering into this precise discussion. And for women, you must be part of a movement. You can't do it on your own. You must be part of a movement. You must be in your own world, connected with all the other women that you know, and if they're all frightened, then you get together and say, why are we frightened and how can we make the world a safer space for us? We have to help each other. That's vital. Really vital. And I think, I think that's the way for you now. That's the way you find your friends, you find your supporters, male and female. Lots of men are feminists, and want the space to be safe for women as well. And you make the space safe. Safety is key, because without safety we cannot relax. It's difficult to do your work. It's difficult to do artistic work if you don't feel safe. And a lot of the time, women just don't feel safe. And it's a key question for us. Key. So you have a question, sir? Yeah. You can shout. Oh, no, look, there's a mic. Oh, marvellous. So everyone can hear it and then I don't have to repeat it.
Thank you for being here. I would like to know, how has your work as an actress inspired and informed your work as a writer? Do you, in your writing process, act out your scenes loudly? And my other question is, what do you expect? You have worked with so many brilliant directors, from Ang Lee to Noah Baumbach, comedies, dramas. What do you expect from a director? How should a director communicate his vision to you as a writer and as an actress?
Yeah, or her vision, obviously, but not often, just because there are so few. But for good questions. Okay, so the first one is, yes, I do act it out. I absolutely do. And sometimes I'll say it and then I'll say, oh, no, that's not sayable. It's not sayable. And if I'm working with children, I often have to change it because they'll have a way of saying something and they can't quite manage, So I'll change things. Yes is the answer. I do act it out all the time. Get up and do it and think, oh, would that work? Oh, that'll work. Yeah. And then I'll act it out and think, oh, God, that's a really bad scene. I can't act that scene, so it's just a bad scene, so I have to rewrite it. So I think it's very helpful. For a director, whoever it is, I would want them to be able to receive what I do and then because when a director directs me now, they're directing a kind of very good car. It's like they've got into a very good car. I know my stuff. I can do pretty much anything they want, but they need to know when to say, the windscreen wiper's on, or I need to just a little bit more oil there. They need to be able to edit. We come back to this question of editing, because all art that's performative art and that's writing that is designed to be performed is a shared experience. It's completely democratically shared. Again, going back to the power thing, give up your sense of power, give up your sense of I've achieved this. I wrote Sense and Sensibility over 5 years with an enormous amount of help from a brilliant, brilliant editor. And I would never have been able to write that script without her. It's not something I did on my own. I've never made a film on my own. I've never written, I've written my comedy sketches on my own, that's true, but that was pretty damn lonely, actually. I much prefer the other way. And when you write something and a screenplay, you're going to share it with a huge company of artists. And that's it's so wonderful to give up your claim to creation. Why bother? Why not acknowledge that we share? We're all artists, all human beings are. And when the electricians come on set, we're not going to be able to make the film without they put the bloody lights on and know how to do that. So share your power, share your privilege, share your sense of creativity, and you'll be happier and less weighed down by your own sense of personal achievement.
Well, thank you very much. Our time here is up.
Oh my
Thank
God.
you for sharing.
Oh God, how awful!
I think we'd all love to listen to you for more hours, but thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me. What a wonderful audience you've been. Thank you so much for your appreciation.